Why motivated people eventually fail and disciplined people don't. A complete 10-chapter book on the power of discipline over motivation. Introduction. Motivation is one of the most celebrated forces in modern culture. People search for it, wait for it, depend on it. They watch motivational videos, read inspirational quotes, listen to powerful speeches. For a brief moment, they feel unstoppable. Then reality arrives. The excitement fades, the energy disappears, the difficult work remains, and suddenly, motivation is nowhere to be found. This is where most goals die. Not because people lack desire, not because they lack potential, but because they built their progress on a foundation that was never designed to last. Motivation is powerful, but it is temporary. Discipline is powerful, and it is reliable. This book explores one of the most important truths about success. Motivation gets you started. Discipline keeps you going. The people who achieve extraordinary results are not necessarily the most motivated. They are often the most disciplined. They act when they feel inspired. They act when they don't. They move forward whether emotions cooperate or not. And over time, that difference creates entirely different lives. Chapter 1. The Motivation Myth. Motivation feels incredible. When motivation arrives, everything seems possible. You wake up early. Set ambitious goals. Make promises. Create plans. Imagine a better future. For a brief period, the world appears full of opportunity. The problem is not that motivation is useless. The problem is that motivation is unreliable. And most people build their lives around something unreliable. This creates a cycle. A cycle repeated by millions of people every year. They become motivated. Take action. Lose motivation. Stop. Become motivated again. Restart. Repeat. The cycle continues. Progress remains limited. Because motivation was never meant to carry the entire journey. Why motivation feels so powerful? Motivation creates emotional energy. It makes difficult things feel easier. The future appears exciting. Challenges seem manageable. Goals feel achievable. This emotional state is valuable. In fact, many great journeys begin with motivation. Businesses, books, fitness transformations, career changes, creative projects. Motivation often lights the initial spark. Without it, many people would never begin. But sparks are not enough. A spark starts a fire. It does not keep the fire burning. The problem nobody talks about: most people secretly believe a dangerous idea. If I were truly committed, I would always feel motivated. This belief creates enormous frustration. Because no human being remains motivated all the time. Not athletes. Not entrepreneurs. Not authors. Not leaders. Not creators. Nobody. Motivation naturally rises and falls. It changes with sleep, stress, circumstances, energy, emotions, weather, health, life. Expecting constant motivation is like expecting constant sunshine. It ignores reality. Society's obsession with motivation. Modern culture loves motivation. Motivational speakers. Motivational videos. Motivational quotes. Motivational content. There is nothing wrong with these things. They can be useful. The problem is that they often create a false impression. They make success appear emotional, as though achievement belongs to those who feel inspired. In reality, success is usually behavioral. It belongs to those who act consistently, whether inspiration is present or not. The gym in January. Every year, gyms become crowded in January. People are motivated, excited, determined. The future feels different. This year will be the year. Then February arrives. Then March. Attendance declines. Not because goals changed. Not because people stopped wanting results. Because motivation faded. The people who remain are rarely the most motivated. They are often the most disciplined. They learn to continue after excitement disappeared. Why motivation cannot be trusted. Imagine a pilot deciding whether to fly based on feelings. Or a surgeon deciding whether to operate based on mood. Or a firefighter deciding whether to respond based on inspiration. The idea sounds absurd. Yet many people approach their goals this way. They act when they feel like it. And stop when they don't. This creates inconsistency. And inconsistency destroys progress. Reliable outcomes require reliable behaviors. Motivation is not reliable enough. The difference between amateurs and professionals: amateurs work when they feel inspired. Professionals work because it is time to work. This distinction changes everything. The amateur depends on emotion. The professional depends on commitment. Emotion fluctuates. Commitment remains. The amateur asks, "Do I feel like it?" The professional asks, "What needs to be done?" Over years, this difference becomes enormous. Why people confuse motivation with commitment? Many people mistake enthusiasm for commitment. They are not the same thing. Enthusiasm is emotional. Commitment is behavioral. Enthusiasm says, "I'm excited." Commitment says, "I'll continue." Enthusiasm starts projects. Commitment finishes them. And life rewards completion far more than excitement. The hidden cost of motivation dependence: when people depend on motivation, they surrender control. Their productivity becomes emotional. Their progress becomes unpredictable. Their future becomes unstable. A bad mood can stop momentum. A stressful week can destroy consistency. A difficult month can derail an entire year. This is a fragile way to live. Because emotions are temporary, goals are long-term. The two rarely align perfectly. What successful people understand: highly successful individuals understand something simple: feelings are information, not instructions. You may feel tired, still act. You may feel uncertain, still act. You may feel discouraged, still act. You may feel uninspired, still act. The disciplined person respects emotions without obeying them. And that creates extraordinary power. The beginning of real progress begins when a person stops asking, "How do I stay motivated?" and starts asking, "How do I remain consistent?" The first question depends on emotion. The second depends on behavior. Behavior is easier to control. And control creates progress. The core truth: motivation is a visitor. Discipline is a resident. Motivation arrives unexpectedly. Discipline stays permanently. Motivation creates excitement. Discipline creates results. Motivation starts journeys. Discipline finishes them. Understanding this truth may be one of the most important turning points in a person's life. Because once you stop depending on motivation, you begin building something stronger. Something more reliable. Something capable of surviving difficult days. Discipline. And that is where lasting success begins. Chapter 2. The Emotional Trap. Most people believe they are making decisions. In reality, many are simply following emotions. They wake up feeling energetic and productive. They work hard. They feel tired and discouraged. They stop. They feel confident. They take risks. They feel uncertain. They retreat. Without realizing it, their emotions become the steering wheel of their lives. This creates a problem. Because emotions change constantly, what feels exciting today may feel exhausting tomorrow. What feels possible this morning may feel impossible tonight. If your actions depend entirely on how you feel, your progress will always be unstable. This is the emotional trap. And it is one of the biggest reasons motivated people eventually fail. Feelings are temporary. Think about how many emotions you experienced this week. Excitement, frustration, confidence, doubt, hope, stress, calm, anxiety. None of them lasted forever. Every emotion arrived, stayed for a while, then left. This is the nature of emotions. They are temporary visitors. The problem begins when people treat temporary feelings as permanent truths. They assume, "I don't feel motivated, so maybe this goal isn't important. I feel afraid, so maybe I shouldn't do this. I feel discouraged, so maybe I'm failing. These conclusions are often incorrect. The feeling changes. The goal remains. The danger of emotional decision-making: imagine a captain steering a ship based on every wave. The ship would constantly change direction. Progress would be impossible. Many people live this way. Every emotional wave changes their behavior. A difficult day changes the plan. A bad mood changes the goal. A moment of doubt changes the commitment. The result is inconsistency. And inconsistency is the enemy of achievement. Why motivation disappears: many people are surprised when motivation fades. They assume something is wrong. But motivation is supposed to fade. It is an emotional state. And emotional states are temporary. The excitement of a new goal cannot last forever. The novelty disappears. The work becomes familiar. Reality replaces fantasy. This is normal. The disciplined person expects this. The motivation-dependent person feels betrayed by it. The excitement curve. Every new goal follows a similar pattern. At the beginning, excitement is high. You imagine success. Visualize outcomes. Feel optimistic. Then reality arrives. The work becomes repetitive. Progress slows. Challenges appear. Excitement declines. This stage surprises many people. But it should not. Because every meaningful goal eventually becomes ordinary. The people who succeed continue anyway. Why emotions make poor leaders? Emotions are valuable. They provide information, signal needs, highlight concerns, reveal priorities. But emotions are poor leaders. A leader requires consistency, stability, direction. Emotions provide none of these reliably. Some days you feel strong. Some days you don't. Some days you feel brave. Some days you don't. If emotions control behavior, progress becomes random. Discipline prevents this. The difference between feeling and doing: one of the most important lessons in life is this: you can feel one thing and do another. You can feel tired and still work. Feel afraid and still act. Feel uncertain and still decide. Feel discouraged and still continue. Many people never learn this skill. They assume feelings must determine actions. Disciplined people understand that feelings and actions are separate. This realization creates enormous freedom. Emotional comfort versus future success. The emotional brain seeks comfort, immediate relief, immediate pleasure, immediate certainty. Future success often requires the opposite: delayed gratification, temporary discomfort, uncertainty, effort. The emotional brain focuses on today. Discipline focuses on tomorrow. This creates a conflict. And how you handle that conflict determines much of your future. The story of two workers. Imagine two workers. The first works only when inspired. The second works according to schedule. After 1 month, the difference may seem small. After 1 year, it becomes obvious. After 10 years, it becomes enormous. The first worker's progress depends on mood. The second worker's progress depends on commitment. Commitment wins. Almost every time. Why people misinterpret resistance? Many people experience resistance and assume it means stop. They think, this feels difficult, so maybe it isn't right. But difficulty often accompanies meaningful work. Writing is difficult. Learning is difficult. Building is difficult. Leading is difficult. Growing is difficult. Resistance is not always a warning sign. Sometimes it is evidence that the work matters. The emotional roller coaster. Motivation-dependent people often live on an emotional roller coaster. High excitement. High effort. Then low motivation. Low effort. Then renewed inspiration. Then another decline. The cycle repeats endlessly. Progress becomes unpredictable. The disciplined person experiences emotions too. But emotions do not control behavior. This creates stability. And stability creates results. Why discipline feels boring? One reason many people avoid discipline is that discipline appears boring. It lacks excitement, drama, intensity. It looks ordinary, routine, predictable. Yet that is precisely why it works. The extraordinary is usually built through ordinary actions repeated consistently. Not through emotional extremes, but through steady execution. The power of emotional independence. One of the greatest forms of maturity is emotional independence. The ability to act regardless of temporary feelings. This does not mean ignoring emotions. It means refusing to become controlled by them. The emotionally independent person asks, "What needs to be done?" Not, "How do I feel?" This shift creates tremendous power. Because behavior becomes reliable. The discipline advantage. Discipline creates a simple but profound advantage. It removes negotiation. The person stops debating, stops waiting, stops depending on emotional permission. The decision has already been made. The work will happen. This eliminates enormous mental friction. And friction is often what prevents action. Why feelings follow actions? Many people believe action follows feelings. Often the opposite is true. Feelings follow action. Start exercising and energy increases. Start writing and creativity increases. Start working and focus improves. Action often creates the emotional state people were waiting for. The disciplined person understands this. So they begin first. The motivation-dependent person waits and remains stuck. The long-term consequences over years. Emotional dependence creates instability. Projects remain unfinished. Goals remain incomplete. Potential remains unrealized. Not because ability was missing. Because consistency was missing. Discipline solves this problem. Not perfectly, but powerfully. Because discipline continues when emotions disappear. The question that changes everything. The next time you don't feel like doing something important, ask yourself, do I want to be controlled by my feelings or guided by my commitments? That question reveals the real issue. Not motivation. Not energy. Not mood. Commitment. And commitment is where discipline begins. The core lesson. Emotions are temporary. Goals are long-term. If temporary feelings control long-term goals, progress becomes impossible. This is the emotional trap. The disciplined person escapes it by understanding a simple truth. You do not have to feel ready. You do not have to feel motivated. You do not have to feel inspired. You simply have to act. Again. And again. And again. Until action becomes part of who you are. The next discovery. If discipline allows people to escape the emotional trap, where does discipline actually come from? Is it a personality trait? A gift? Something you're born with? Or is it something anyone can develop? The answer surprises most people. Because discipline is not primarily a feeling. It is a decision. A decision repeated so often that it eventually becomes a way of life. Chapter 3. Discipline is a decision. Many people look at disciplined individuals and assume they possess something special. More willpower. More determination. More mental toughness. More self-control. They imagine discipline as a rare gift given to a fortunate few. But discipline is rarely a gift. It is a decision. A decision made repeatedly, day after day, moment after moment. Long before discipline becomes visible to others, it begins as a simple choice. Do what matters, even when you don't feel like doing it. This is the foundation of discipline. Not emotion. Not talent. Not personality. Choice. The great misunderstanding. One of the biggest misconceptions about disciplined people is that they enjoy doing difficult things. Sometimes they do. Often they don't. The disciplined athlete does not always want to train. The disciplined writer does not always want to write. The disciplined entrepreneur does not always want to work. The disciplined student does not always want to study. They simply make a different decision. Instead of asking, "What do I feel like doing?" they ask, "What needs to be done?" That shift changes everything. The first decision. Every act of discipline begins with a single decision. A small moment. Usually unnoticed. The alarm rings. The person decides to get up. The workout feels difficult. The person decides to continue. The project becomes frustrating. The person decides to keep working. These moments rarely look dramatic. Yet they shape entire lives. Because success is built from accumulated decisions, not accumulated intentions. Why decisions matter more than feelings? Feelings change constantly. Decisions create direction. A person may feel motivated today and discouraged tomorrow. If behavior follows emotion, progress becomes unstable. But if behavior follows decisions, progress becomes predictable. This is one reason disciplined people achieve more. Their actions are guided by choices, not moods. Discipline is a vote. Imagine every disciplined action is a vote. A vote for the type of person you are becoming. Every workout casts a vote. Every study session casts a vote. Every promise kept casts a vote. No single vote changes everything. But repeated votes create identity. Eventually, the person stops saying, "I'm trying to become disciplined," and starts saying, "I am disciplined." Because the evidence becomes undeniable. The myth of willpower. Many people believe success depends on massive amounts of willpower. Research and experience suggest something different. Willpower is limited. It fluctuates. It becomes exhausted. Disciplined people do not rely entirely on willpower. They rely on decisions that become habits. The more automatic a behavior becomes, the less willpower it requires. This is why discipline often appears effortless from the outside. The decision has already been made. Making the decision once. One secret of disciplined individuals is that they reduce decision-making. Instead of deciding every day whether to exercise, they decide once. Then they follow the routine. Instead of debating whether to write, they create a schedule. Instead of negotiating with themselves, they create standards. This reduces mental fatigue. And consistency becomes easier. Because repeated debate often destroys action. Standards over preferences. Motivated people follow preferences. Disciplined people follow standards. Preferences change. Standards remain. A preference says, "I'd like to work today." A standard says, "I work regardless." A preference says, "I hope I feel productive." A standard says, "I produce regardless." Standards create reliability, and reliability creates results. Why small decisions matter. People often wait for major opportunities to prove themselves. In reality, character is built through small decisions. Returning a phone call, keeping a promise, finishing a task, showing up on time, completing today's work. These moments seem insignificant, yet they train the mind. Every disciplined decision strengthens future discipline. Every undisciplined decision weakens it. The effect compounds. Discipline during easy times. Most people can make good decisions when life is easy. The real test arrives during difficult periods. Stress, fatigue, disappointment, failure, pressure. These moments reveal the strength of discipline. Because discipline exists precisely for the days when motivation disappears. Anyone can move when conditions are ideal. Discipline moves under imperfect conditions. The cost of constant negotiation. Many people negotiate with themselves endlessly. Maybe tomorrow. Just this once. I deserve a break. I'll start next week. The problem is not the individual excuse. The problem is the habit of negotiation. Each negotiation weakens commitment. Each delay strengthens avoidance. Disciplined people minimize negotiation. They decide, then act. Why discipline creates confidence. Confidence often comes from evidence. Evidence comes from action. Action comes from discipline. This means discipline indirectly creates confidence. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, trust grows. Every time you follow through, belief strengthens. The brain notices consistency. And consistency creates self-respect. This is why disciplined people often appear confident. Not because they never doubt themselves. Because they repeatedly prove themselves reliable. The freedom of structure. Many people view discipline as restrictive, a loss of freedom. In reality, discipline often creates freedom. The disciplined person enjoys greater health, greater financial stability, greater opportunities, greater competence, greater confidence. The temporary restriction creates long-term options, and options create freedom. This is one of the great paradoxes of life. Discipline is a skill. Perhaps the most encouraging truth about discipline is this: it can be learned. No one is born perfectly disciplined. People develop it, strengthen it, practice it, improve it. Just like any skill, small decisions create larger habits. Larger habits create stronger identity. Stronger identity creates lasting discipline. The process is gradual, but it works. The compound effect of decisions. Every decision matters because decisions compound. One disciplined choice may seem insignificant, but repeated daily, it changes direction. Direction changes behavior. Behavior changes outcomes. Outcomes change lives. This is why discipline is so powerful. Its effects are often invisible at first, then impossible to ignore later. The real difference. Motivated people wait for emotional energy. Disciplined people create behavioral consistency. Motivated people ask, "How do I feel?" Disciplined people ask, "What is required?" Motivated people depend on conditions. Disciplined people create results despite conditions. That difference may seem small, yet it separates extraordinary achievement from unrealized potential. The question that builds discipline: whenever you face a choice, ask yourself, what would the disciplined version of me do right now? Then do that. Not once. Repeatedly. Because discipline is not a single decision. It is thousands of decisions, accumulated over time. The core truth. Discipline is not something you have. It is something you practice. Not a personality trait. A behavioral choice. Not a gift. A skill. Not an emotion. A commitment. The people who succeed understand this. And because they understand it, they stop waiting for motivation. They start making decisions. And those decisions gradually transform their lives. The next discovery. If discipline is built through decisions, how do disciplined people make those decisions easier? Why do some individuals remain consistent for years while others struggle daily? The answer lies in something powerful that most people overlook: systems. Because successful people do not rely on motivation. And they do not rely on willpower alone. They build systems that make success almost inevitable. Chapter 4. The Power of Systems. Most people focus on goals. Disciplined people focus on systems. This difference appears small, but it changes everything. Goals tell you where you want to go. Systems determine whether you get there. A goal says, "I want to lose 20 pounds. A system says, "I exercise every morning and prepare healthy meals." A goal says, "I want to write a book." A system says, "I write 1,000 words every day." A goal says, "I want to build a successful business." A system says, "I spend 2 hours daily improving my product and serving customers." Goals provide direction. Systems create progress. And progress is what ultimately produces results. Why goals alone often fail? Most people become excited by goals. They imagine the future, visualize success, feel inspired. Then they stop, not because the goal was wrong, because they never built a system. A goal without a system is merely a wish. It describes an outcome, but it does not describe a process. And outcomes are created by processes. Every achievement is the result of repeated actions, not repeated intentions. The problem with motivation-based living: motivated people often approach life like this: when I feel motivated, I'll work. When I feel inspired, I'll create. When I feel ready, I'll begin. This strategy works occasionally, but it fails consistently. Because emotions fluctuate, a system removes emotional dependency. The work happens because the system says it happens, not because emotions approve. Why systems reduce decision fatigue? Every decision consumes energy. What should I do today? When should I work? Should I exercise? Should I study? Should I write? If these questions must be answered daily, consistency becomes difficult. Disciplined people eliminate many of these decisions. They create routines, schedules, processes. The decision is made once, then repeated automatically. This preserves mental energy, and consistency becomes easier. The morning advantage. Consider two individuals. The first wakes up and decides what to do each day. The second follows a predetermined routine. Over time, the second person gains a tremendous advantage. Less uncertainty, less procrastination, less wasted energy, more execution. Systems create momentum, and momentum is powerful because action becomes automatic rather than optional. The hidden strength of routines. People often underestimate routines because they appear ordinary. But routines are one of the most powerful forms of discipline. A routine eliminates negotiation. It transforms effort into habit. It creates reliability. And reliability produces results. The athlete trains because training time has arrived. The writer writes because writing time has arrived. The creator creates because creation time has arrived. The routine becomes stronger than the mood. Environment shapes behavior. One reason systems work is that they recognize an important truth: environment influences behavior. People often believe success depends entirely on willpower. In reality, surroundings matter enormously. If distractions are everywhere, focus becomes difficult. If unhealthy food is easily available, healthy eating becomes harder. If productive tools are accessible, work becomes easier. Disciplined people design environments that support desired behaviors. They do not rely solely on self-control. They make success easier. The system beats the mood. A motivated person says, "I'll work when I feel like it." A disciplined person says, "I'll work because it is part of the system." One depends on emotion. The other depends on structure. Structure wins. Again and again. Because structure survives bad moods, bad weather, stressful days, low energy, emotional fluctuations. The system remains. Why professionals depend on systems? Professionals understand something amateurs often miss. Consistency matters more than intensity. A professional writer may not produce brilliant work every day, but they write every day. A professional athlete may not feel energetic every day, but they train every day. A professional musician may not feel inspired every day, but they practice every day. The system creates opportunities for excellence. Without the system, excellence becomes accidental. The myth of perfect days. Many people wait for perfect conditions, perfect energy, perfect focus, perfect timing, perfect motivation. These conditions rarely arrive. Systems recognize this reality. They do not require perfection. They require participation. A productive day may not be perfect, but progress still occurs. And progress matters more than perfection. The power of automation. The best systems automate positive behavior. The less thinking required, the more likely the action occurs. Prepare tomorrow's workout clothes tonight. Schedule work sessions in advance. Create recurring routines. Reduce friction. Increase convenience. Every step that simplifies action increases consistency. And consistency compounds. Small systems, big results. People often assume systems must be complicated. Usually, the opposite is true. Simple systems often work best. Read 10 pages every day. Walk 30 minutes every day. Write for 1 hour every day. Save a percentage of every paycheck. These actions appear small, yet repeated consistently, they transform lives. The power lies in repetition, not complexity. Why most people abandon systems. Many people create systems. Few maintain them. Why? Because systems eventually become boring. The novelty disappears. The excitement fades. The work becomes repetitive. This is where motivation-dependent people struggle. They crave excitement. Disciplined people value consistency. And consistency often looks boring from the outside. The compounding effect. Systems create compounding benefits. A workout today improves tomorrow. A study session today improves future understanding. A writing session today improves future skill. Each action builds upon previous actions. Over months and years, the results become extraordinary. What appears small in the beginning becomes massive later. This is the hidden power of systems. The system is the success. Many people view systems as a path to success. In reality, the system often is the success. Because if you consistently execute a valuable system, results become increasingly likely. The goal is important. But the process determines whether the goal becomes reality. Fall in love with the process. And the outcomes often take care of themselves. Building a life that works. The most successful people rarely depend on daily inspiration. They build lives that support success. Their schedules support success. Their routines support success. Their environments support success. Their systems support success. The result is not perfection. The result is consistency. And consistency creates extraordinary outcomes. The reliability advantage. Imagine two people with equal talent. One depends on motivation. The other depends on systems. Who achieves more over 10 years? Almost always the second person. Because reliability beats occasional brilliance. Steady effort beats sporadic intensity. Systems create reliability. And reliability creates results. The question that changes everything. Instead of asking, "How can I stay motivated?" ask, "What system would make this easier to repeat?" This question shifts focus from emotion to structure. And structure is far more dependable. The core truth. Motivation is temporary. Willpower is limited. Systems endure. They create consistency, reduce friction, support discipline, and transform difficult behaviors into automatic ones. This is why disciplined people often appear unstoppable. Not because they possess endless motivation. Because they built systems that continue working long after motivation disappears. The next discovery. Systems help disciplined people remain consistent. But eventually every system faces a challenge. A challenge that destroys countless goals. The boring days. The ordinary days. The days when nothing exciting happens. The days when progress feels invisible. The days when motivation completely disappears. Those are the days that determine everything. And disciplined people handle them very differently. Chapter 5. Winning the boring days. Most people believe success is created on extraordinary days. The breakthrough day. The big opportunity. The life-changing moment. The day everything finally works. These moments matter. But they are not where success is built. Success is built on ordinary days. The quiet days. The repetitive days. The boring days. The days when nothing exciting happens. The days when no one is watching. The days when motivation is nowhere to be found. These are the days that separate disciplined people from motivated people. Because motivation loves excitement. Discipline thrives in repetition. The hidden reality of success. Imagine observing a successful person for a year. You might expect constant excitement. Big victories. Major breakthroughs. Dramatic achievements. Instead, you would probably see something surprisingly ordinary. Working. Practicing. Learning. Improving. Repeating. Day after day. Week after week. Month after month. The reality of success is often far less exciting than the fantasy. And that is exactly why most people struggle to achieve it. Why boredom is dangerous. Human beings naturally seek novelty. New experiences. New opportunities. New stimulation. The brain enjoys variety. Routine often feels boring. Unfortunately, many valuable activities require repetition. Exercise, writing, studying, building, practicing, saving money, improving relationships. Mastery is repetitive. Growth is repetitive. Success is repetitive. And repetition creates boredom. The question is not whether boredom will appear. The question is how you respond when it does. The excitement trap. Motivated people often perform well at the beginning. Everything feels fresh. The goal feels exciting. Progress feels meaningful. Then the novelty fades. The work becomes familiar. The excitement disappears. Interest declines. Consistency suffers. The project stalls. Not because the goal lost value. Because the emotional reward disappeared. This is the excitement trap. And it catches millions of people every year. The discipline advantage. Disciplined people understand something important. The boring days count too. In fact, they often count more. Anyone can work when inspired. Anyone can push hard when excitement is high. The real advantage appears when enthusiasm disappears. Because most competitors stop. Most people quit. Most people lose focus. The disciplined person continues. And that continuation creates separation. Why repetition creates greatness? Every skill improves through repetition. A musician repeats scales. An athlete repeats drills. A writer repeats practice. A business owner repeats processes. Repetition is not glamorous. It is effective. The brain learns through repetition. Strength develops through repetition. Expertise develops through repetition. Mastery develops through repetition. There is no shortcut around this reality. The valley of invisible progress. One reason people abandon boring work is because progress often becomes invisible. At first, improvements are obvious. Then growth slows. The gains become harder to see. Effort continues. Results appear unchanged. This period frustrates many people. But it is often where the most important development occurs. Because while visible progress slows, invisible progress continues. Skills deepen. Habits strengthen. Foundations solidify. The disciplined person trusts the process. The motivated person often abandons it. The difference between interest and commitment: interest is emotional. Commitment is behavioral. Interest says, this is exciting. Commitment says, this is important. Interest lasts while enjoyment remains. Commitment survives boredom. Interest depends on emotion. Commitment depends on values. The people who succeed are usually committed, not merely interested. Why professionals love routine? Professionals understand something amateurs often ignore. Routine creates reliability. The professional does not need excitement to perform. The routine handles that. The work begins at the scheduled time. The practice session happens. The training continues. The task gets completed. Routine transforms action from a choice into a standard. And standards create consistency. The myth of constant passion. Modern culture often teaches that passion should feel exciting all the time. Reality is different. Every meaningful pursuit contains boring moments. Even passions become repetitive. Even dreams involve routine. Even exciting careers include mundane tasks. People who expect constant passion become disappointed. People who expect repetition become prepared. Preparation creates resilience. The compound value of showing up. Imagine two individuals. One works intensely when motivated. The other works consistently regardless of mood. After a month, the difference may seem small. After a year, the difference becomes obvious. After a decade, the difference becomes extraordinary. The gap is not created by intensity. It is created by attendance. The disciplined person simply shows up more often. And showing up repeatedly creates momentum. Why consistency feels ordinary? Consistency rarely feels impressive in the moment. One workout is ordinary. One page written is ordinary. One study session is ordinary. One good decision is ordinary. Yet extraordinary outcomes are built from ordinary actions repeated thousands of times. The individual action appears small. The cumulative effect becomes massive. This is why consistency is so powerful, and why it is often underestimated. Learning to love the process. One of the greatest transformations occurs when people stop focusing exclusively on outcomes. Instead, they learn to appreciate the process. The workout itself. The writing itself. The learning itself. The building itself. The practice itself. This mindset creates sustainability. Because motivation often depends on outcomes. Discipline learns to value the work itself. What happens when others quit? Every time someone quits during a boring phase, opportunities increase for those who remain. Competition decreases. Consistency becomes more valuable. Patience becomes more powerful. The disciplined person benefits not only from their own persistence but also from the impatience of others. This is one reason discipline creates such extraordinary results. The silent advantage. There is a silent advantage hidden inside boring days. Most people do not notice it. The ability to continue when nothing exciting is happening. The ability to trust the process when results are delayed. The ability to remain consistent without immediate rewards. This advantage compounds over time, and eventually becomes visible as success. Why motivation eventually loses? Motivation thrives on novelty. Discipline thrives on repetition. Success requires repetition. Therefore, success ultimately favors discipline. Motivation can help begin. Discipline ensures continuation. And continuation is what creates results. The question that matters whenever boredom appears, ask yourself, can I continue even when this feels ordinary? Because that question determines more than most people realize. The answer reveals whether your commitment is emotional or genuine. Whether your effort depends on excitement or purpose. Whether you are building temporary momentum or lasting success. The core truth. The boring days are not interruptions. They are the process. They are where habits are formed. Skills are refined. Character is built. Discipline is strengthened. Most people want breakthroughs. Few are willing to embrace repetition. Yet repetition is where breakthroughs are born. The people who understand this gain a remarkable advantage. Because while others search for excitement, they continue making progress. Day after day. Week after week. Year after year. The next discovery. Winning the boring days creates consistency. But consistency alone is not enough. For discipline to become permanent, something deeper must change. Not your schedule. Not your goals. Not your environment. Your identity. Because lasting discipline is not ultimately about what you do. It is about who you believe you are. And that realization changes everything. Chapter 6. Identity beats emotion. Most people try to change their behavior. Disciplined people change their identity. This is one of the most important differences between temporary improvement and permanent transformation. Behavior can change for a few days. A few weeks. Sometimes a few months. Identity can change a lifetime. That is why motivated people often struggle. They focus on actions. Disciplined people focus on becoming the kind of person for whom those actions are normal. And once identity changes, discipline becomes dramatically easier. The problem with behavior only change. Imagine someone decides to exercise. They create a plan. Buy new clothes. Join a gym. Feel motivated. For a while, everything goes well. Then challenges appear. The schedule becomes busy. Energy drops. Motivation fades. The habit disappears. Why? Because the person was trying to force a new behavior onto an old identity. Deep down they still viewed themselves as someone who skips workouts. Someone inconsistent. Someone who starts but rarely finishes. Eventually behavior returned to match identity. Identity always pulls behavior toward itself. The power of self-perception. People act in ways that feel consistent with who they believe they are. A disciplined person wakes up early because that behavior matches their identity. A reliable person keeps promises because that behavior matches their identity. A writer writes because that behavior matches their identity. An athlete trains because that behavior matches their identity. The action feels natural because it aligns with self-perception. This is why identity matters so much. Behavior follows belief. Why motivation fails. Motivation tries to create action without changing identity. It says, work harder, push yourself, stay inspired. This can work temporarily, but eventually the old identity returns. And old identities produce old behaviors. Discipline works differently. It starts by asking, who am I becoming? Once that question is answered, behavior becomes easier to sustain. The identity question. Most people ask, what do I want to achieve? Disciplined people ask, who do I need to become? The first question focuses on outcomes. The second focuses on transformation. Outcomes matter. But transformation creates outcomes. A person who becomes disciplined naturally produces disciplined results. A person who becomes consistent naturally produces consistent outcomes. Identity creates behavior. Behavior creates achievement. Every action is evidence. The brain constantly collects evidence. Every action sends a message. Every decision communicates something. Skip a workout and the brain records it. Complete the workout and the brain records that too. Keep a promise. Break a promise. Finish a task. Avoid a task. The brain is always gathering evidence about who you are. Over time, these pieces of evidence become identity. This is why small actions matter so much. They are votes. Votes for the person you are becoming. Becoming instead of achieving. Imagine two people. The first says, I want to run a marathon. The second says, I want to become a runner. The first focuses on a goal. The second focuses on identity. Once the marathon is complete, the first person may stop. The second continues. Because runners run. The identity survives after the goal is achieved. This is why identity-based discipline lasts longer than motivation-based effort. The danger of negative identities. Many people unknowingly carry harmful identities. I'm lazy. I'm not disciplined. I never finish things. I'm bad with money. I'm not a leader. These statements seem harmless, but they influence behavior. The mind seeks consistency. If you believe you are lazy, lazy actions feel natural. If you believe you lack discipline, discipline feels unnatural. The identity becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Rewriting the story. The good news is that identity is not fixed. It can change. Not through positive thinking alone. Through repeated evidence. A person becomes disciplined by practicing discipline. Reliable by practicing reliability. Confident by practicing courage. The story changes because the evidence changes. And evidence is more powerful than wishes. Why small wins matter. Many people underestimate small victories. Yet small victories create identity. Reading 10 pages. Completing a workout. Finishing a task. Keeping a promise. These actions may appear insignificant, but they provide evidence. Evidence builds belief. Belief strengthens identity. Identity influences future behavior. The cycle becomes self-reinforcing. The identity loop. Discipline often develops through a simple loop. Action creates evidence. Evidence creates belief. Belief creates identity. Identity creates action. Then the cycle repeats. At first the actions feel difficult. Eventually they feel natural, not because the task changed, because the person changed. The difference between forced and natural motivation often feels forced. You must convince yourself, push yourself, inspire yourself. Discipline rooted in identity feels different. The behavior becomes part of who you are. A disciplined person does not constantly debate whether to act. The action aligns with identity. And identity removes much of the resistance. Why disciplined people appear different from the outside. Disciplined people seem unique. Mentally tougher. More committed. More consistent. The truth is often simpler. They have spent years reinforcing a different identity. They see themselves differently. Therefore they behave differently. The visible behavior is merely the surface. The identity underneath is the real source of strength. Building a new identity. Identity change begins with a decision. Not a declaration. Not a slogan. A decision. The decision to become someone different. Then comes evidence. Repeated evidence. Every day. Every week. Every month. The process is gradual, but it is powerful. And unlike motivation, it becomes stronger over time. Why identity survives difficult days. Motivation disappears during difficult days. Identity remains. A motivated person may stop when life becomes stressful. A disciplined person continues because the behavior is part of who they are. Stress affects emotion. It does not automatically change identity. This is one reason disciplined people remain consistent during adversity. Their actions are rooted deeper than feelings. The mirror test. Every evening ask yourself, what kind of person did my actions prove me to be today? Not what you intended. Not what you hoped. What you actually demonstrated. The answer reveals your current identity and your future direction. Because identities are built through actions, not aspirations. The core truth. Motivation depends on emotion. Discipline depends on identity. Emotion fluctuates. Identity endures. The more your desired behaviors become part of who you are, the less you need motivation. Eventually, the action stops feeling like effort. It starts feeling like you. That is when discipline becomes powerful. And that is when real transformation begins. The next discovery. Identity makes discipline stronger. But even disciplined people encounter setbacks, failure, mistakes, disappointment, unexpected obstacles. The difference is that disciplined people respond differently. While motivated people often stop after failure, disciplined people use failure as fuel. And that ability changes everything. Chapter 7. Discipline during failure. Failure is where motivation goes to die. At least for most people. When things are going well, motivation is easy. Progress creates excitement. Results create confidence. Success creates momentum. Almost anyone can stay committed when evidence of improvement is visible. The real test comes when things go wrong. When effort produces little reward. When plans fail. When mistakes happen. When setbacks arrive unexpectedly. This is where motivated people often stop. And this is where disciplined people separate themselves from the crowd. Because motivation depends on positive emotions. Discipline depends on commitment. And commitment survives failure. The reality nobody wants to hear. Every meaningful goal includes failure. Every business experiences setbacks. Every athlete loses competitions. Every creator produces mediocre work. Every leader makes mistakes. Every expert was once inexperienced. Failure is not an exception. It is part of the process. The people who succeed understand this. The people who depend on motivation often don't. They expect progress to be smooth. When reality proves otherwise, motivation disappears. Why failure feels personal. One reason failure hurts so much is because people attach it to identity. They don't think, that attempt failed. They think, I failed. This distinction matters. A failed attempt is information. A failed identity feels permanent. Disciplined people separate the two. They evaluate actions, not self-worth. The mistake becomes a lesson, not a label. The motivation crash. Motivation often relies on visible progress. When progress slows, motivation weakens. When progress stops, motivation collapses. When failure occurs, motivation may disappear entirely. This is why people quit after setbacks. The emotional reward they depended on vanishes. Without motivation, they feel lost. Because motivation was carrying the entire journey. And motivation was never strong enough for that responsibility. Discipline doesn't need success to continue. One of the greatest strengths of discipline is that it functions independently of results. A disciplined person may fail, yet still continue. Not because failure feels good. Because commitment remains. The schedule remains. The standard remains. The identity remains. Failure affects outcomes. It does not automatically affect discipline. And that distinction creates extraordinary resilience. The difference between a setback and an ending. Many people confuse setbacks with endings. They experience difficulty and assume the journey is over. But most failures are not endings. They are interruptions, detours, lessons, adjustments. The disciplined person understands this. They see failure as part of the path, not evidence that the path was wrong. This mindset prevents countless unnecessary quits. Why most people quit too early? Consider how many successful stories almost ended early. The entrepreneur who struggled for years. The athlete who lost repeatedly. The writer who received countless rejections. The inventor whose ideas failed again and again. History is full of people who succeeded only because they continued longer than expected. The difference was rarely talent. It was persistence. And persistence is a form of discipline. Failure reveals character. Success often hides weaknesses. Failure exposes them. When things go wrong, priorities become visible. Values become visible. Character becomes visible. Anyone can claim commitment. Failure tests it. Anyone can promise consistency. Failure measures it. This is why setbacks are valuable. They reveal the truth. Not about your potential, but about your current habits and mindset. Learning instead of quitting. Every failure presents two options: quit or learn. The first option creates temporary relief. The second creates growth. Disciplined people choose learning more often. They ask, what went wrong? What can improve? What should change? These questions transform failure into education. And education creates future success. The emotional recovery gap. Failure creates emotional pain. That is unavoidable. Disappointment, frustration, embarrassment, regret. Even disciplined people experience these emotions. The difference lies in recovery. Motivated people often remain stuck in emotion. Disciplined people eventually return to action. The emotional pain passes. The commitment remains. And commitment guides the next step forward. Why failure creates strength. Strength rarely develops during easy periods. Comfort does not build resilience. Success does not always build character. Difficulty does. Failure forces adaptation, patience, problem solving, humility, perseverance. The qualities developed during setbacks often become the foundation of future achievements. This is why many successful people later describe failures as valuable experiences. Not because they enjoyed them, because they learned from them. The long-term perspective. A disciplined person views failure differently because they think differently about time. A single bad day means little. A single bad week means little. Even a single bad year may mean less than people imagine. The long-term perspective changes everything. Failure becomes one chapter, not the entire story. And stories continue beyond difficult chapters. Resilience is practiced. Many people think resilience is something you either possess or lack. Reality suggests otherwise. Resilience is practiced. Every time you continue despite difficulty, resilience grows. Every time you recover from disappointment, resilience grows. Every time you choose action over self-pity, resilience grows. Like discipline itself, resilience is a skill. And skills improve through repetition. Why discipline outlasts motivation. Motivation says, I'll continue while I feel good. Discipline says, I'll continue because I decided to continue. Motivation depends on conditions. Discipline survives conditions. Motivation needs encouragement. Discipline needs commitment. This is why disciplined people endure setbacks more effectively. Their progress is not dependent on emotional approval. The story of the stone cutter. Imagine a stone cutter striking a rock. 1 strike. 2 strikes. 10 strikes. 100 strikes. Nothing appears to happen. Then suddenly the rock breaks. Was it the final strike that caused the result? Not entirely. The previous strikes mattered too. Success often works this way. The visible breakthrough receives attention. The invisible effort made it possible. Failure frequently occurs during the invisible phase. The disciplined person continues striking. The importance of returning. Perhaps the most important skill after failure is returning. Returning to the work. Returning to the habit. Returning to the process. Returning to the commitment. Not perfectly. Simply returning. Many people believe success requires perfection. It does not. It requires recovery. The ability to begin again. Again and again. Until progress accumulates. The question that builds resilience when failure occurs: ask yourself, what is the next step? Not, why am I not good enough? Not, why does this always happen? The next step question creates movement. And movement creates momentum. Even small momentum is powerful. Because stagnation is the real enemy. The core truth. Failure is not what destroys motivation-dependent people. Their response to failure does. They interpret setbacks as reasons to stop. Disciplined people interpret setbacks as reasons to adjust. That difference compounds over time. One person quits. The other learns. One person retreats. The other adapts. One person waits for better emotions. The other returns to work. And eventually, those different responses create different futures. The next discovery. Discipline survives failure. But many people still resist discipline because they believe it limits freedom. They imagine discipline as restriction. Rules. Constraints. Obligations. Yet disciplined people often experience more freedom than everyone else. This seems like a contradiction. Until you understand one of life's greatest paradoxes, discipline does not reduce freedom. Discipline creates it. Chapter 8. The freedom hidden inside discipline. At first glance, discipline appears restrictive. It seems like a collection of rules, schedules, responsibilities, commitments, sacrifices. Many people look at disciplined individuals and think, that looks exhausting. That looks limiting. That doesn't seem free. Yet if you examine the lives of highly disciplined people closely, you often discover something surprising. They usually possess more freedom, more choices, more opportunities, more control over their lives, not less. This is one of life's greatest paradoxes. Discipline feels restrictive in the short term but creates freedom in the long term. The lack of discipline feels freeing in the short term but creates limitations in the long term. Understanding this principle changes everything. The two types of freedom. Most people think of freedom as the ability to do whatever they want, whenever they want, however they want. This is one form of freedom. It is immediate freedom. But there is another form. A deeper form. The freedom to create the life you desire. The freedom to choose opportunities. The freedom to control your future. The freedom to act from strength instead of necessity. Discipline is often the bridge between these two forms of freedom. The freedom to be healthy. Imagine two people. The first eats whatever they want whenever they want. The second follows disciplined nutritional habits. Initially, the first person appears freer. No restrictions. No planning. No structure. Years later, the situation may look very different. The disciplined person enjoys greater energy, better health, more physical capability, more options. The undisciplined person may experience limitations. The temporary freedom produced long-term restrictions. The temporary discipline produced long-term freedom. The financial example. Money offers another illustration. A person who spends every dollar immediately feels free. No sacrifices. No delayed gratification. No budgeting. For a while, life feels easy. The disciplined saver appears restricted. Yet years later, the outcome often reverses. The saver gains choices, options, security, independence. The spender gains stress, dependence, constraints. The short-term freedom became long-term limitation. The short-term discipline became long-term freedom. Why people misunderstand discipline? The problem is that humans naturally focus on the present. We notice today's sacrifice. We overlook tomorrow's reward. We feel today's discomfort. We underestimate future benefits. This creates a distorted view. Discipline appears painful because its costs are immediate. Its rewards are delayed. Undisciplined behavior appears attractive because its rewards are immediate. Its costs are delayed. Time eventually reveals the truth. But by then, habits have already shaped outcomes. Discipline creates options. One of the greatest benefits of discipline is optionality. Options create freedom. A disciplined student has more career options. A disciplined entrepreneur has more financial options. A disciplined athlete has more physical options. A disciplined learner has more intellectual options. Discipline expands possibility. It creates opportunities that would not otherwise exist. And opportunities are a powerful form of freedom. The prison of impulse. People often assume discipline is restrictive. Yet impulsiveness can become its own prison. Imagine being controlled by every desire, every distraction, every craving, every emotional impulse. That is not freedom. That is dependence. The person becomes reactive rather than intentional. Their actions are determined by momentary feelings. Discipline creates independence from impulse. And independence creates power. The ability to choose freedom is not merely doing what you want. It is having the ability to choose wisely. The disciplined person possesses greater control over behavior, greater control over attention, greater control over decisions. This control creates flexibility, and flexibility creates freedom. A person unable to control themselves is rarely as free as they imagine. Discipline and confidence. Confidence often comes from trust. Specifically, self-trust. When you consistently follow through on commitments, trust grows. When trust grows, confidence follows. The disciplined person knows they can rely on themselves. This confidence creates opportunities. Because opportunities often require action. And action requires belief. Thus discipline indirectly creates freedom through confidence. The freedom of competence. Competence creates freedom. The ability to solve problems, learn skills, create value, adapt to challenges. Disciplined people develop competence faster because they practice consistently. The result is increased independence. They become less dependent on luck, less dependent on circumstances, less dependent on rescue. This form of freedom is incredibly valuable. Why comfort becomes a trap? Comfort often disguises itself as freedom. Avoiding effort feels easy. Avoiding responsibility feels relaxing. Avoiding discipline feels liberating. But comfort has a hidden cost. It delays growth. And delayed growth creates future limitations. The comfortable path frequently becomes the restrictive path. The disciplined path frequently becomes the liberating path. This is the paradox most people discover too late. The freedom to pursue meaningful goals require discipline. Writing books, building businesses, mastering skills, creating art, leading organizations, serving communities. These pursuits demand consistency. Without discipline, many meaningful ambitions remain unrealized. The result is regret. And regret is one of the greatest limitations a person can experience. Discipline helps transform aspirations into reality. And reality creates fulfillment. Delayed gratification and freedom. Disciplined people become skilled at delayed gratification. They sacrifice smaller rewards for larger ones. This ability creates tremendous advantages. Because life often rewards those willing to wait. The immediate reward is tempting. The greater reward requires patience. Discipline bridges the gap. And the rewards accumulate. The discipline of time is the most valuable resource. Everyone receives the same 24 hours each day. The difference lies in how those hours are used. Disciplined individuals protect time. They prioritize, focus, plan, execute. The result is not merely productivity. It is freedom. Because effective use of time creates opportunities unavailable to those who waste it. Why successful people appear lucky. Many successful people appear fortunate. Observers notice the outcome. The promotion. The wealth. The recognition. The achievement. What they often miss is the discipline behind the outcome. Years of preparation. Years of consistency. Years of effort. Discipline frequently creates opportunities that look like luck. The freedom others admire was often earned quietly over time. The responsibility advantage. Discipline and responsibility work together. The disciplined person takes ownership, plans carefully, acts consistently, follows through. This behavior creates trust. Trust creates opportunities. Opportunities create freedom. The cycle becomes self-reinforcing. Each disciplined action increases future possibilities. The long-term equation. Life frequently presents a simple equation: short-term comfort or long-term freedom. Short-term pleasure or long-term opportunity. Short-term ease or long-term strength. The disciplined person repeatedly chooses the second option. Not because it feels better immediately. Because they understand where it leads. The question that changes perspective whenever discipline feels restrictive: ask yourself, what freedom is this discipline creating for my future self? That question changes everything. Because discipline is rarely about today. It is an investment in tomorrow. And investments require patience. The core truth. Discipline is not a punishment. It is a tool. A tool for creating options. Creating opportunities. Creating confidence. Creating competence. Creating freedom. The restrictions are temporary. The rewards are lasting. People who understand this stop viewing discipline as an enemy. They begin viewing it as an ally. A pathway to a larger life. A stronger life. A freer life. The next discovery. By now, we have explored motivation, discipline, systems, identity, failure, consistency, and freedom. All of these elements lead to one final transformation. The moment when a person stops relying on motivation entirely. The moment discipline becomes automatic. The moment action becomes part of identity. The moment a person becomes nearly unstoppable. And that is where our journey goes next. Chapter 9. Becoming Unstoppable. Most people spend their lives trying to feel ready. Ready to begin. Ready to commit. Ready to change. Ready to take action. Ready to pursue their dreams. The problem is that readiness is often an illusion. The feeling people are waiting for rarely arrives. And even when it does, it doesn't stay. This is why motivated people struggle. Their actions depend on emotions. Their progress depends on circumstances. Their consistency depends on inspiration. Disciplined people eventually reach a different place. A place where action no longer depends on feelings. A place where commitment becomes stronger than emotion. A place where consistency becomes automatic. This is the point where people become unstoppable. Not because they never fail. Not because they never struggle. But because they stop allowing those things to stop them. What unstoppable really means. When people hear the word unstoppable, they often imagine perfection. Endless energy. Constant confidence. Permanent motivation. That is not reality. Unstoppable people still experience doubt, fear, fatigue, stress, disappointment, failure. The difference is that these experiences no longer control behavior. The obstacle may slow them down, but it does not stop them. They have learned the most valuable skill in achievement: continuing. The turning point. Every disciplined person experiences a turning point. Not a dramatic breakthrough. Not a life-changing event. A mental shift. A realization. The realization that waiting for motivation is a losing strategy. The realization that feelings cannot be trusted. The realization that action must become non-negotiable. This shift changes everything. Because once action becomes non-negotiable, progress accelerates. Why consistency creates momentum. Momentum is one of the most powerful forces in life. At first, action feels difficult. Resistance is strong. The habit is weak. Everything requires effort. Then consistency begins working. The behavior becomes familiar. The resistance decreases. The routine strengthens. Momentum develops. And momentum makes continued action easier. This is why disciplined people appear unstoppable. They are benefiting from years of accumulated momentum. The difference between starting and continuing. Starting is exciting. Continuing is difficult. Starting receives applause. Continuing receives little attention. Starting requires courage. Continuing requires discipline. Most people can start. Few can continue. And because few continue, those who do gain enormous advantages. The world is full of abandoned goals. Abandoned projects. Abandoned dreams. Continuation is rare, and rarity creates value. The identity of an unstoppable person. Unstoppable people possess a powerful identity. They no longer ask, "Should I do the work?" The answer is already decided. The work is part of who they are. A disciplined athlete trains. A disciplined writer writes. A disciplined creator creates. A disciplined entrepreneur builds. The behavior has become identity. And identity eliminates much of the internal conflict. The death of excuses. Excuses survive only when commitment is weak. Once commitment becomes strong, excuses lose power. The disciplined person still hears excuses, but they no longer obey them. The excuse appears. The action happens anyway. This is a critical distinction. Discipline is not the absence of excuses. It is the refusal to let excuses decide. Why small wins matter. People often underestimate small victories. Yet unstoppable individuals understand their importance. A small win reinforces identity. A small win strengthens confidence. A small win builds momentum. One productive day may seem insignificant, but productive days accumulate. Weeks accumulate. Months accumulate. Years accumulate. And eventually extraordinary results emerge. The unstoppable person respects small wins because they understand compounding. The power of keeping promises. Every promise you keep to yourself strengthens self-trust. Every promise you break weakens it. Self-trust is one of the foundations of discipline. Without self-trust, confidence becomes fragile. With self-trust, confidence becomes durable. The unstoppable person develops a reputation with themselves. A reputation for follow-through. A reputation for consistency. A reputation for action. And that reputation becomes a source of strength. When motivation becomes irrelevant. One of the most liberating moments in personal growth occurs when motivation becomes optional. The person no longer asks, "Am I motivated?" The question becomes irrelevant. The action happens regardless. This creates freedom. Because emotional fluctuations no longer determine productivity. Progress becomes stable, reliable, predictable. And predictability creates results. Why most people never reach this point. Many people remain trapped in the motivation cycle. Inspired, active, discouraged, inactive, inspired again. The cycle repeats. The problem is not lack of potential. It is dependence on emotion. Breaking free requires discipline, and discipline requires practice. The people who become unstoppable simply practice longer than everyone else. The strength of standards. Motivated people follow moods. Disciplined people follow standards. Standards create consistency. Consistency creates trust. Trust creates confidence. Confidence creates action. Action creates results. The cycle becomes self-reinforcing. Eventually discipline no longer feels difficult. It feels normal. That is when true transformation occurs. The long-term advantage. Imagine two individuals. One works only when motivated. The other works according to standards. At first, the difference is small. Months later, it grows. Years later, it becomes dramatic. The disciplined person accumulates more skill, more experience, more opportunities, more confidence, more momentum. The gap widens continuously, not because of talent, because of consistency. The silent superpower people search for: secret advantages, hidden techniques, special talents. The greatest advantage is often simpler: reliability. The ability to continue, the ability to show up, the ability to follow through, the ability to keep moving when others stop. This ability looks ordinary. Its results are extraordinary. The question that creates strength: whenever you face resistance, ask yourself, what would happen if I simply continued? Not perfectly, not brilliantly, simply continued. Because continuation solves problems that motivation never can. Continuation builds skills. Continuation creates opportunities. Continuation produces results. Continuation changes lives. The ultimate difference: motivated people depend on emotion. Disciplined people depend on commitment. Motivated people seek inspiration. Disciplined people build habits. Motivated people start strong. Disciplined people finish strong. And in the long run, finishing matters more than starting. The core truth. Becoming unstoppable is not about becoming superhuman. It is about becoming consistent. It is about reducing the influence of emotion, strengthening commitment, building identity, following systems, trusting the process, and continuing long after motivation disappears. This transformation does not happen overnight, but it happens. One action at a time, one decision at a time, one day at a time. The final discovery. We have reached the final stage of the journey. The place where everything comes together. Motivation, discipline, identity, consistency, systems, failure, freedom. All of these ideas point toward one final truth. A truth that explains why disciplined people ultimately win, and why motivation alone is never enough. Chapter 10. The Final Difference. At the beginning of this book, we explored a simple question: why do motivated people eventually fail while disciplined people don't? Now, after examining motivation, emotion, systems, identity, failure, consistency, freedom, and momentum, the answer has become clear. The difference is not talent. It is not intelligence. It is not luck. It is not even motivation. The final difference is this: disciplined people continue after everyone else stops. That is the secret. Simple, powerful, and life-changing. The truth about success is often misunderstood. People see the result, the achievement, the recognition, the accomplishment. What they rarely see is the repetition behind it. The thousands of small actions. The ordinary days. The quiet decisions. The moments of persistence. The willingness to continue when continuing no longer feels exciting. Success is rarely one extraordinary act. It is usually many ordinary acts repeated consistently over time. The great illusion. One of the biggest illusions in modern culture is the belief that success belongs to the most inspired people. The most motivated. The most passionate. The most enthusiastic. Reality tells a different story. Many talented people never fulfill their potential. Many intelligent people never achieve their goals. Many passionate people never complete what they start. Not because they lack ability. Because they lack consistency. And consistency is the language of discipline. The long game. Disciplined people think differently about time. Most people focus on days. Disciplined people focus on years. Most people want immediate results. Disciplined people invest in long-term outcomes. Most people become discouraged when progress is slow. Disciplined people understand that meaningful growth often takes longer than expected. This perspective gives them a tremendous advantage. Because life rewards patience more often than people realize. The power of compounding. One disciplined action seems insignificant. One workout. One page written. One chapter studied. One promise kept. 1 hour invested. Yet discipline compounds. Like interest in a bank account. Small gains accumulate. Tiny improvements multiply. Daily actions become life-changing outcomes. This is why disciplined people eventually appear extraordinary. Not because they did extraordinary things once. Because they did ordinary things consistently. Why motivation was never the answer. Motivation has value. It inspires beginnings, creates excitement, generates energy. But motivation was never meant to carry the entire journey. It is a spark, not a fuel source. The people who depend entirely on motivation eventually struggle. Because motivation disappears. Discipline remains. Motivation fluctuates. Discipline stabilizes. Motivation inspires action. Discipline sustains action. And sustainability is what produces results. The real meaning of discipline. Many people misunderstand discipline. They see it as punishment, restriction, rigidity, sacrifice. But discipline is not punishment. It is self-respect in action. It is honoring commitments, keeping promises, acting according to values, choosing long-term rewards over short-term comfort. Discipline is not something done to you. It is something done for you. A gift from your present self to your future self. The person you become. Perhaps the most important outcome of discipline is not achievement. It is transformation. The process changes you. The consistent effort changes you. The repeated decisions change you. The commitment changes you. Eventually you become someone different. Stronger. More reliable. More confident. More resilient. More capable. The goal matters. But the person you become while pursuing the goal matters even more. Looking back. Imagine 2 versions of yourself. The first waits for motivation. The second develops discipline. 10 years pass. The first person has many intentions. Many unfinished projects. Many abandoned goals. Many regrets. The second person has progress. Skills. Confidence. Achievements. Growth. Not because life was easier. Because consistency was stronger. The gap between these 2 lives begins with daily choices. The ultimate responsibility. No book. No speaker. No mentor. No video. No strategy. No system can make someone disciplined. Discipline ultimately requires a personal decision. The decision to act. The decision to continue. The decision to follow through. The decision to become responsible for your own progress. That responsibility may feel heavy. But it is also empowering. Because it places control back where it belongs. In your hands. What happens next? At some point after finishing this book, motivation will return. You may feel inspired. Excited. Ready to change. That is wonderful. Use it. Take advantage of it. But remember what you have learned. Do not depend on it. Because eventually motivation will leave again. And when it does, discipline must take over. That is the moment that matters. Not when action feels easy. When action feels difficult. Not when enthusiasm is high. When enthusiasm is gone. Those moments reveal the strength of your commitment. The final question. Years from now, when you look back on your life, what will matter more? How often you felt motivated? Or how often you acted despite not feeling motivated? The answer is obvious. Results come from actions, not feelings. Achievements come from consistency, not inspiration. Transformation comes from discipline, not temporary excitement. A new standard. From this point forward, consider adopting a new standard. Stop asking, "Do I feel like it?" Start asking, "Is it important?" If it is important, do it. Whether motivation is present or not. Whether excitement exists or not. Whether confidence appears or not. Act. Because action creates momentum. Momentum creates progress. Progress creates results. And results create the life you want. The legacy of discipline. Discipline leaves a legacy. It builds healthier bodies, stronger minds, better careers, more meaningful relationships, greater achievements. But perhaps most importantly, it creates self-respect. The deep confidence that comes from knowing you can trust yourself. Knowing you will follow through. Knowing you will continue. Knowing you will act, even when it is difficult. That confidence is priceless. The final truth. Motivated people eventually fail because they build their progress on emotions. Disciplined people succeed because they build their progress on commitments. Emotions change. Commitments endure. Motivation starts journeys. Discipline finishes them. Motivation creates possibilities. Discipline creates realities. Motivation makes you excited about a better future. Discipline builds it. And in the end, that is the final difference. Not talent. Not luck. Not intelligence. Not circumstances. Just the quiet, powerful decision to continue. Again. And again. And again. Until the life you once imagined becomes the life you live.